Drupal-based sites look somewhat different from those built in plain old HTML. Now we're going to look at Drupal's inner workings to understand exactly what happens when visitors request a page from Drupal. It's actually quite different from the mechanism of an HTML site, and understanding the differences is important as you go forward in building and maintaining your Drupal site. Let's start by taking a look at what happens when you try to get a page from an HTML site. There you are sitting at home. You ask for the page, and your request goes to a web server. Usually it's going to be the Apache web server. The web server then delivers a page such as index.html. That page, in turn, will pull together all of the resources that it needs to present something to you. That'll be text and graphics files, and possibly other files and processes. That might, for example, include PHP programs. Once the page has been created, it gets sent back to the web server, which then goes to you and you see it on your web browser. Let's take a look at some of the files that are inside an HTML site. In this case, I used my own site, tomgeller.com. It's actually quite simple. All of the files that you can call from a web browser end in HTML in this case, clients.html, endorsements.html, and so forth. And the way that this site is constructed, the additional things that you need are in subdirectories, graphics, portfolio, and so forth. In addition, there's a cascading style sheet here, which ends with .css. Now we're going to take a look at what happens when somebody requests a page from a Drupal website. Once again, there you are sitting at your computer, and you make the same sort of request to an Apache web server. However, in this case, instead of going to an HTML file, it actually calls up a PHP program. That program, in turn, calls together graphic files, but also data that are inside of an SQL database. And it might also call additional PHP programs or other types of programs. All of these things are taken and put together by the PHP program as a page, which, again, gets sent back to the web server and then goes back to you. If we take a look at the files in a Drupal site, we notice something very interesting. I'm going to rearrange these by type here. None of these files end in HTML. These text files are really just help files, but the main parts end in PHP. Let's open up this index.php file, which is what someone calls when they go to the main page of a Drupal website. And here we are. If you know HTML, you'll notice that this looks nothing like the HTML that you're used to, because it is in fact PHP programming language. Let's look through this index.php file. All of these things at the beginning are just comments. So the first real command in the PHP file is this require once ./includes/bootstrap.inc. And if you go back to your file structure, you can actually go into the folder called includes and find that file. So this one PHP program is immediately calling another PHP program. And if you go inside this, you'll find that it calls others and others. And so you have this whole cascade of PHP programs that eventually come together to create your page. At first, this might seem like an incredibly convoluted and wasteful way to call a simple web page, but in practice, it's not. PHP doesn't require very many resources to switch among files like this, and the computer quite naturally navigates among them according to logic. However, this computer-friendly structure can be extremely user-unfriendly if you're trying to figure out where certain commands came from or where to put files to change the way your site looks and acts. In brief, the default location for your site's overall appearance, called its themes, are in the themes folder. And you can see here, these are different themes that show up in Drupal. Files that are specific to an individual site go into the sites folder, and you have a choice to make certain files available to all of your Drupal sites, or if you're just running one Drupal site, you could put it into the default folder. I hope that you haven't been scared away by this description of Drupal's inner workings, which can, admittedly, be pretty intimidating. The good news is that you don't have to know most of this to run a Drupal site, as most of the administration is done through a web browser-based interface and an FTP program. Still, understanding some of these points, that your content is stored in a database, for example, instead of HTML files, will help you in putting together your Drupal site.